Hello. Thank you all for being here. So, a little bit about myself. I'm passionate about research and dissemination. My interests include security and privacy aspects of AI, but also application of AI in cybersecurity. And currently, I'm a security researcher at Orange Services. After this presentation, you will have the answer to 3 major questions about post-quantum cryptography. First, what is it? Why do we need it? And third, what neural network has to do with it? What's the connection between neural networks and post-quantum crypto? So in the beginning, we will see a small introduction about RSA and Diffie-Hellman, classical cryptography. Then we will see about Shor's algorithm and why it's a danger for current cryptographic primitives. Then we will talk a little bit about NIST post-quantum initiatives, what key encapsulation is and signatures. Then we will emerge into the area of neural networks and cryptography in what is called neural cryptography, and we will see what is a tree-parity machine. And in the end, we will see a demo and some conclusion. So Diffie-Hellman is a classic cryptographic key exchange protocol. The idea is quite simple. So we have 2 parties, Alice and Bob. Alice sends G to the power A, Bob sends G to the power B. Alice then computes G to the power B to the power A and get the share key G to the BA. Bob will compute G to the power A to the power B and get the same share key G to AB. So this is the shared key. A and B are secret keys, known only by Alice and Bob. G to the power A and G to the power B are public keys, known by both of them. This key exchange protocol is based on 2 hard mathematical problems. The first one is Diffie-Hellman. That is, given G and G to the power X, determine X. And currently, there isn't any known polynomial algorithm that solves this problem. And the second hard problem is the Diffie-Hellman problem. So here is the discrete logarithm, and here is the Diffie-Hellman problem. Given G, G to the power X, and G to the power Y, determine G to the power XY. Also, for this problem, Diffie-Hellman, we don't know any polynomial time algorithm. So even if an attacker intercepts G, G to the power A, and G to the power B, the attacker cannot recover the shared secret G to the power AB. This is Diffie-Hellman. Now, another well-known cryptographic algorithm is RSA. RSA is based on factorization, so given n, which is equal p times q, we don't know any polynomial time algorithms to determine p and q. This is an encryption algorithm, and the idea, So the idea of the encryption algorithm is given in plaintext m. In order to get a ciphertext, we compute c to the power me, and in order to decrypt the ciphertext, we compute m as c to the power d, where e or d is equal to 1. E is known by everybody, it's part of the public key together with n, and d it's only known by the party which decrypts. Okay, so just a moment to reset this. It was quite challenging not to have any problems. All right, so this is Diffie-Hellman. Now, about Shor's algorithm. Like you see in the abstract of the paper, it's about it's about a polynomial algorithm that solves both the discrete logarithm problem and the factorization problem. But there is a trick. This polynomial time algorithm doesn't run on classical computers. It runs on quantum computers. And now you say, okay, quantum computers, it's science fiction. In order to break a real RSA key of 2048 bits, we need something like 20 million qubits. Now we see small quantum computers at IBM, at Google, but nothing with 20 million qubits. But let's take a look at how things are actually going. So back in 2019, I was a third-year undergraduate student. I was reading about quantum computing, quantum algorithms, and so on. And suddenly it was a release from IBM, a real quantum computer that can be accessed by anyone with 27 qubits. It wasn't much, but it allows me to write some academic papers performing experiments on a real quantum computer. A year later, we see another quantum computer also from IBM with 65 qubits. Then 1 year later, we see a quantum computer with 120 qubits. Then another 1 year later with 400 qubits. And then last year, we saw a quantum computer with almost 1,000 qubits. So as you see, from year to year, the number of qubits double. And we are sure that in the near future, the threshold of 1 million qubits, it will be reached. It's a matter of 5 years. Because like you see, the number of qubits double it in time. So there is a problem. And because there is a problem, we need a solution. And currently, we have two major solutions. The first solution is based on quantum key agreement. These are quantum protocols based on quantum effects, like entanglement and so on. They require specific hardware, high cost, because that hardware costs a lot, but it's guaranteed to work. So quantum key agreement protocol, it's guaranteed by physical laws that cannot be changed by the attacker or a legitimate party. It's guaranteed that it's safe. On the other hand, we see a different set of solutions, namely post-quantum cryptography. These are algorithms that can be implemented on classical computers, are based on hard mathematical problems like Diffie-Hellman and RSA. Like I said, it runs on usual hardware, low cost. Here, I'm not talking about the cost of transferring the actual TLS that we use today into a TLS that uses post-quantum cryptography. I'm not referring to those costs, but obviously those costs are smaller than the cost of changing the entire internet infrastructure into one that uses quantum key agreement protocols. And many believe it will work. And I say many believe it will work because right now we don't have something like a mathematical proof that those hard mathematical problems that represent the basis of post-quantum cryptography cannot be solved by a quantum computer. Actually, a few months ago, it was something like a spike over the internet because a group of researchers proposed the quantum algorithms to efficiently solve lattices problems. Lattices problems are using many post-quantum algorithms. Fortunately for us, I think, that solution had a bug. So that's why NIST launched a competition in order to select the best post-quantum key agreement protocol and post-quantum signature scheme. In 2016, it was the call for proposal. Many algorithms were submitted. 1 year later, we saw the first round. So after the first round, some of the algorithms entered in round 2, then round 3, and finally in 2020, it was round 4, and some finalists were selected. And those finalists were Crystal Kyber for encryption, and Crystal Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx Plus for signature. Encryption is the mechanism used for key encapsulation. So these 4 algorithms were the finalists of the first call for proposal. The competition is still going. So now let's see a little bit about three-parity machine. A three-parity machine, like you see here, is a normal neural network. I have one output neuron here. On the hidden layer, we have k neurons. And then each of those k neurons is connected to an input neuron. So basically, like you see, the input is partitioned into k neurons. The thing with these three-parity machines is that we have non-unitary weights only between the input layer and the hidden layer. So here we have the weights. Between the output neuron and the hidden neuron, we don't have any weights. Actually, the weights are 1, so the results are not impacted. So a little bit of notation, like I said, we have k groups of hidden neurons. Each hidden neuron is connected to n input neurons. And another interesting thing about this three-parity machine is that the weights are not real numbers like we encounter in deep learning algorithms that are used, for example, for image classification. Here, the weights are integers between 0 and L, where L is some bound. The inputs are also integers. So just to make sure, I have here some notation about the network. So I denote with xi the input of the I group. Y I is the value of the I hidden neuron. Then O is the output neuron. And here I have a sigma function which returns the sign of x. And now let's see how we run such a network. So actually, it's quite simple. In the first step, we perform a dot product between the weights and the inputs. So we perform a dot product between this set of weights and this set of inputs. And the value of the hidden neuron will be the sign of that dot product. So here I will have the sign of the dot product between the weights. This is a normal operation with neural networks. So actually, the idea is that on the hidden layer, we will see only +1 or -1 because we take the sign of the dot product. And the output neuron is actually the product. This is special about three-parity machine. The output neuron is the product of the hidden layer. So the output neuron, like the hidden layer, will have either a value of +1 or a value of -1. So the operation is quite simple. This type of network is easy to implement, and it's lightweight because unlike any other type of neural network, we don't use activation function, we don't use heavy linear operation, just a dot product here, here, and here for each group, and then we take the sign, and then finally we multiply the signs and get the output. So it's easy to run such a network. Now, I promise you a key agreement protocol based on neural networks. So this is the protocol. In the first step, like I said, here I have 2 actors, Alice and Bob. In the first step, they exchange over a public channel the parameters of the network, k, the number of hidden neurons, and the number of input neurons from a group, because like I said, we have k group of n input neurons, and here is the bound that is used for that L that is used for the weights and for the input. I have another special parameter here, the seed, and it's important to notice that the seed is also exchanged over a public channel. because in cryptography, usually seeds are something like secrets. We don't exchange them over a public network. Here we exchange it over a public network. The seed actually is used just to be sure that at each iteration of the key agreement protocol, the network are run over the same input here. That's the purpose of the seed. So it isn't used for encryption or signature or something like this. The only purpose of the seed is to make sure that both networks, both TPMs, TPM Alice and TPM Bob, are run at each iteration of the key agreement protocol with the same input. So we run as many iterations as we need in order to make sure that the weights are equal. And I'm referring to the weights between the hidden layer and the input layer. And here, this equal sign is actually we compare the elements from both set of weights in a pairwise manner. So the first step is to compute the output. Both Alice and Bob compute the outputs. They exchange the outputs over a public channel. So this is all happening over a public channel. Then internally, they update the weights of the TPMs only when the output neurons are equal. So if they manage to get the same output, they update the weights. But here again, it's a trick. They update the weights only for those groups that are equal to the output, that have the hidden neuron equal to the output neuron. And we repeat this procedure as many times as you need in order to get sure that the weights are equal. This equality can be tested, for example, by encrypting a random nonce or something similar. We have solutions. And just to be clear, so as an example, here let's say I have the Alice TPM. They exchange the output neurons over the public channel, and they agree that, okay, we have to update the network. So let's say that the value of the output neuron was +1, and here on the hidden layer we have +1, -1, and +1. So Alice will update only the weights on this group because the value of this hidden neuron is equal to the value of the output neuron. And she also updates these weights because also this hidden neuron has the same value as the output neuron. And by updating, I mean a very, very simple learning rule, a very simple updating rule, just add the input. That's all. So when I say that Alice updates this set of weights and this set of weights, I'm referring that Alice takes the weights that she already have and add the input to the current value of the weights. That's the updating rule. So it's very simple. It's a simple addition. So again, maybe it seems something quite strange. We start with two random neural networks and we manage to, by some magic, to make them equal. And in order to get an intuition, I have here two main cryptographic actors. So here I have Alice and here I have Bob. Actually, I have to return this safely to my daughter. But just to give you an intuition about why this is work. So let's say that we are in a bounded room. I have a wall on my right and a wall on my left. Alice and Bob start at random points on this room, and they move only horizontally. So at each iteration of their walk, they move in the same direction with the same number of steps. And maybe between iteration, the number of steps and the direction are not the same. But the most important thing is that when they move in an iteration, they move in the same direction with the same number of steps. So let's say that they move first a step to the left, then 2 steps to the right, and so on. Now, please notice that the distance between Alice and Bob, the distance between these 2 points, remain equal. if they move in the same direction with the same number of steps, the distance between them remain equal. Now, at some moment in time, Alice or Bob will eventually hit the wall. And when, for example, Bob hit the wall, he will not have where to go because he hit the wall. But Alice will have. And in that moment, the distance between Alice and Bob becomes shorter. And in this random walk, eventually, they will meet in some wall. And when they meet, they will remain synchronized for the rest of the iteration. That's the idea. The distance between Alice and Bob will only decrease in this random walk, will never increase, and eventually will become 0. And now the connection with the TPMs, that to get you an intuition. Like I show you in the protocol, both inputs, both networks are run with the same input. So at each iteration, both networks are run with the same input. That assures that the set of weights, which are actually points in some n-dimensional space, it doesn't matter, they are points, but when we run the networks, both networks with the same input, we get sure that the weights are moving with the same distance at each iteration. And by updating the weights only when the outputs are the same, here and here, we make sure that we update the weights in the same direction. So we either don't update the weights if the outputs are not equal, we let them as they are, or if we update the weights with the same quantity and in the same direction. And the distance between the set of weights, the two sets of weights, will never increase. So the distance between the set of weights of Alice network and the set of weights of Bob's network will never increase. The distance will only decrease. So that's the intuition why we can synchronize two neural networks that came in the form of a three-parity machine. Now, there was some research on this topic, and here you see something like then versus now. In the good old days of neural cryptography, we didn't have cryptographic definition of security. We have definition like, you know, I can guarantee you that the attacker cannot recover 90% of the key. And okay, the attacker cannot recover 90% of the key, but you cannot guarantee me that the attacker cannot recover 89.999% of the key. So that definition of security isn't cryptographic. Now we have a more cryptographic definition of security, and we define that the protocol is secure if the attacker cannot recover a large percentage of the share key, and we use cryptographic terms like non-negligible functions. Then we had the inputs that were binary. So initially when those type of network were designed, the inputs were binary. Now we work with inputs that are weights. Also, the weights were integers. So in the initial form of the protocol, the weights are allowed to be negative. Now we work only with positive weights. And the most important thing is that in the initial form of the protocol, in the share key there was also included the maxima values. You'll see in the demo part about these maxima values. Now we exclude the maximal value from the share key. And the most important point of this comparison is the security definition. Now, we want from a key agreement protocol to meet two main properties: to be efficient, and to be efficient for a legitimate party, and to be hard for an attacker to break. And regarding the efficiency, here we run some analysis regarding the running time of the protocol. And as you can see, we can synchronize the synchronization time between Alice and Bob is only linear in n. N is the number of the input neurons from a group. So it's efficient, it's linear. We can synchronize two neural networks in linear time. That is with respect to n. Here we have with respect to k. It's still polynomial. It's a quadratic function here. So we can synchronize two neural networks in polynomial time with respect to k. So the overall protocol is efficient. And now we have to deal with the second step. It's hard for an attacker to break. And maybe after you saw this protocol, you are wondering, okay, I have a neural network on Ali's side, I have a neural network on Bob's side. They exchange the information only over public channel. So why can't an attacker do the same as Alice and Bob? Actually, the attacker can do the same steps as Alice and Bob. That is the naive attack. In time, there was also a geometric attack, which is more advanced than the naive attack. We also encounter in time a majority attack, which is more advanced than the geometric attack. And finally, a genetic attack. This is the latest attack. But of course, there were attacks also on Diffie-Hellman and RSA in the beginnings. This doesn't mean that the protocol isn't secure. Because in time, there appear, like you see in that slide, then versus now. In time, we modify the structure of the network, the way the protocol works, and so on, in order to mitigate this type of attacks. And just as a funny fact, the first three attacks was actually discovered by Shamir, which invented RSA. So we have a conflict of interest. All right, so now the idea of the naive attack is very simple. I have an attacker, and the attacker intercepts the outputs of Alice and Bob and check whether those outputs are equal, and check whether, in the case the outputs are equal, the attacker check whether the outputs are equal to his output. And if all three outputs are equal, then the attacker also updates his set of weights. And finally, he will manage to synchronize with Alice and Bob, finally. But here is the trick. When we run the key agreement protocol, after, like you see in that figure with the protocol, after we synchronize the network, after we have equality between the two sets of weights, we stop. And the trick here is that the attacker cannot synchronize his neural networks in time. Mathematically, yes, eventually the attacker can synchronize his, you'll see the attack in the demo part, the attacker can eventually synchronize his neural network with Alice and Bob, but Alice and Bob stops earlier. And just to give you an intuition why is that, let's see the number of possible outputs. So here I have Alice, here I have Bob, and here I have Eve. So we can see, for example, we will see something like there are 8 combinations, -1, -1, -1, -1, -1, -1, +1, -1, +1, -1, -1, +1, and +1 here, +1, -1, -1, +1, -1, and +1, then +1, +1, and -1, and finally, sorry for this, +1, +1, and +1. These are the entire set of possible combinations between the three outputs. Now, let's see when Alice and Bob updates the weights. Well, Alice and Bob will update the weights in those cases in which their outputs were equal. So we have this case here. We have this case here, because Alice and Bob we have -1, -1. Then we will have an update here and an update here. So in 4 out of 8 possible outputs, Alice and Bob updates the set of weights. And by updating the set of weights, they become closer to that share key, like you see in the intuition part. But now let's see when if updates the set of weights. If will update its set of weights only if the three outputs are equal all together. And we have just here, because we have -1, -1, -1, and here, when we have +1, +1, +1. So this is for Alice and Bob, 4 out of 8. But for if we have only 2 out of 8 situation in which if updates the weights. So just to give you an intuition, like you see, the synchronization process of the attacker is more slow than the synchronization process of the legitimate parties. That's why even if the attacker eventually will synchronize with Alice and Bob, it cannot do so in a short amount of time. Because after Alice and Bob has 2 sets of weights that are equal, they will stop. They will not exchange any messages. Now, I said earlier that from a cryptographic protocol, we expect that a cryptographic protocol should be hard for an attacker. And hard for an attacker means that the attacker has to spend an exponential amount of time in order to break that protocol. And here you can see that the synchronization percentage between the attacker, this is in the naive protocol, the synchronization percentage between the attacker and one legitimate party at the end of the protocol decreases exponentially in K. So this indicates that this protocol may be good, because it's hard for an attacker to recover the key. So just to be clear, we have Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob becomes the key agreement protocol. Eventually they will stop. And when they stop, we measure how much key the attacker managed to recover. And the number of bits the attacker managed to recover from the shared key decreases exponentially in K. So this is good from a cryptographic perspective. Decreasing in exponential time is good. Now, regarding the naive attack with respect to n, we see the same behavior. The percentage of the key recovered by the attacker at the end of the protocol decreases exponentially in n. Now, regarding the geometric attack, I will not enter into mathematical details. It's a more efficient attack. The idea is that when Alice and Bob have the same outputs, but Eve has a different outputs, Eve will flip one of his hidden neurons in order to get the same output as Alice and Bob. That's the intuitive idea. But again, even if the attacker is more efficient, the majority attack is a parallel instantiation of the geometric attack. But like you see in this figure, anyway, here it's not the naive attack, it's the geometric attack. Also, the percentage of the key recovered by the attacker drop exponentially in K. So, now let's see the demo. So here I define a simple TPM. I don't know if it's large enough. Now, like you see here, the parameters and the number of input neurons from a group, K, which is the number of hidden layer, and L, which is the bound of the weights. Here I generate a random set of weights, because like I said, the parties initialize the set of weights randomly. Now, yes. Yes, if you can point me how to do that quickly. Oh, great. It's better. So we define the structure of the network. Here is the output function. Like I said, to compute the output, we simply perform here a dot product, and then we take the sign of that dot product. And in order to compute the final output neuron, we multiply the hidden neurons. And here we have the update function. And like I said, the update function is very simple. The update function is basically an addition between the current set of weights and the input. But we update the weights only when the output neurons are equal. And this is also very important because after we update the weights, we have to make sure that the weights remain in that bound. So here is the synchronization percentage between Alice and Bob. And here is a function that computes the real key length. You'll see in a second. Now, I instantiate this protocol with 4 hidden neurons. Each hidden neuron is connected to 16 input neurons, and the bound is 64. So the weights will be integers between 0 and 64. Now here we have the network of Alice, the network of Bob, and let's see the initial synchronization percentage. Like you see, it's very small because we initialize the weights randomly. This is in the beginning. Now let's run the protocol. Like you see here, we compute the output. Alice compute her outputs, Bob compute her outputs, and if the outputs are equal, we update the weights of both Alice and Bob. So they managed to get synchronized in 30 steps. There were 30 exchanges between them. And now let's see what's the deal with that maxima effects. If we print the weights of Alice and Bob, we can see that many of the weights are equal to 64. 64, if you remember, is the limit of the weights. The weights are integers between 0 and 64. And we see a lot of 64. And that's a problem for us because the attacker doesn't need a quantum computer, or a classical computer, or anything like this in order to guess that, oh, I know many of the key elements will be equal to L, will be equal to 64 in this case. And we have to exclude these elements from the key. And the real key length between Alice and Bob that was agreed in this protocol is about 300 bits. So when we computed the real key length, we excluded from the set of weights the extreme values, the L's. Now let's see an attack. So we again reinstantiate Alice, Bob, and now we have Eve. The initial synchronization percentage between Alice and Bob is 0 this time. Between Alice and Eve, it's a little bit. So we have 0.03. Now the synchronization percentage between Bob and Eve is also larger than the synchronization percentage between the legitimate parties. So we can say that the attacker starts with an advantage in this case. And now here is the naive attack. Like I said, all 3 actors computes the outputs. If the output between Alice and Bob, if the outputs of Alice and Bob are equal, Alice will update her set of weights, Bob will update his set of weights. But we have one extra step. If those outputs are also equal to the output of the attacker, to the output of Eve, Eve will also update his weights. So let's see here, Alice and Bob synchronizing 29 steps this time. Here we have the key length of Alice and Bob, the legitimate party, around 300 bits. And now let's see the attacker key length. Like you see here, the attacker managed to recover something like 300 bits. So the difference, the attacker needs basically to mount a brute force attack just for 12 bits. But now let's see another experiment with, let's say, something like 60. So we run this again. So now the key length between Alice and Bob was around 1000, and the key length, the real key length recovered by the attacker is around 600. And now the attacker has to brute force around 600 bits. That's why when we increase the parameters of the network, we get an exponential decrease in the attacker recover key. So in summary, yes, we saw a protocol that is efficient, it's lightweight. Unlike post-quantum cryptography, like I say, it's lightweight because post-quantum cryptography, like you saw dilithium, you saw Sphinx Plus, those aren't quite efficient algorithms. They have large key length, they compute a lot, and so on. This protocol is lightweight, it's suitable for example for IoT devices, for RFI devices, and so on. But we have to wonder, what about authentication? Because, all right, an attacker cannot synchronize with Alice and Bob. But what stops the attacker to mount a man-in-the-middle attack? To talk with Alice like he was Bob, and to talk with Bob like he was Alice. And the answer here is yes, we cannot integrate authentication in this protocol. When I say that we cannot integrate authentication in this protocol, I'm referring to there is no point in using a post-quantum signature scheme, for example, which is heavy to compute, in order to assure authentication of what is supposed to be a lightweight key agreement protocol. But we have, in the area of post-quantum cryptography, for the signature part, we have efficient algorithms, efficient signature algorithms that can be integrated with this protocol. And I'm referring to those algorithms, to those signature algorithms that are based on hash functions. So an important idea here is to notice that it may be a solution. This type of protocols are nowhere around NIST competition. There wasn't submitted, there wasn't any submission on neurocryptography at NIST. It's something in the beginning, so we don't know, maybe eventually they will get broken. So the state of the art right now is something like a game between a cat and a mouse. The attacker comes with some algorithm that managed to recover the key, and the neurocryptography community managed to mitigate that attack. But this is not something that should discourage us in pursuing this protocol, because a similar game was happening also with RSA and Diffie-Hellman. Because RSA, yes, in theory it's secure, but if you use, for example, small groups, it can be easily broken. Also, RSA has a lot of tricks. If you don't use RSA in a correct way, it's insecure. So this is normal for a key agreement protocol on the beginning. The advantage of this protocol is that it's not based on a hard mathematical problem. And like I said, it's lightweight, it's simple to implement. But the major need here in this area of neurocryptography is formalization. Until now, we don't have any formal framework that models the security of the protocol. We have experiments, like you saw earlier. We can prove experimentally that the synchronization percentage decreases exponentially. You can prove that the running time is polynomial, and so on. But we don't have a clear setup, a clear formal setup regarding the security of the protocol. And that is what we should work on in this field of neurocryptography. So your feedback is really important, so please feel free to use the feedback system at the entrance, and thank you. If you have questions.
So you explained how if you were to visualize it in a one-dimension line, Alice and Bob are at almost all times at the same distance. They are moving in the same direction, keeping the distance, until one of them hits one of the bounds, either 0 or the upper limit, 64 in your example. However, what if, in this example, Eve is, let's say, lucky enough to start the training process of the three-parity machine between Alice and Bob?
Yes, this is a possibility, but the chances of that happening are almost the same as chances of getting the private key of RSA key by guessing. Because you see in the demo simple example, the graphics that you saw are performing when L is around 200. So we'll deal with something like 256 bits. So it's a small chance of getting, but yes, it's possible.
But here is the follow-up question. Since Eve knows that at some point both Alice and Bob will need to hit the walls, the lower boundary and the upper boundary, can't Eve selectively choose a few points in the n-dimension space that have a higher chance to be at one point between Alice and Bob from a geometrically point of view?
Maybe. We don't know yet. Because like I said, we don't have a formal framework. In an intuitive way, I will say no, because we work with high dimensions, for example, and right now we don't know, in the community I'm referring, we don't know anything like this, anything that is closer to this type of attack. Maybe the closest attack, similar, the idea is similar. The intuitive way is that Eve grows subtrees of the three-parity machine in order to get closer when Alice and Bob get closer to the limit in that idea. But it was proven that that attack is decreased exponentially in K. Not in N, in K, in the number of hidden neurons. But I don't know, maybe tomorrow you'll see an attack like this. It's still, it's a very new thing in cryptography.
I think maybe that's a niche and a path to be explored even by the proponents of this solution, because we ought to stay proactive.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.